So, ever since Walker Howard decided to enter the transfer portal around Thursday afternoon, there's been a whole lot of animosity from LSU fans. And I want to know why. Where is that coming from? We'll get into that plus so much more on today's edition of Locked on LSU.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Plus, we're on YouTube as well. So you can listen to the podcast on the go on your preferred podcast platform, but also check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked on LSU in the search bar, hit that subscribe button, and you won't miss a single second of your Locked on LSU content. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I'm your host, as I am every day. I graduated from LSU. I've been covering LSU sports since 2016, and I'm now a sports talk radio host in Nashville, Tennessee. And of course, Locked on LSU, we're part of the Locked on Network, your team every day. So by now, we've learned on Wednesday, I think I said Thursday afternoon earlier. I meant Wednesday afternoon. When Walker Howard decided to enter the transfer portal, a lot of our initial reactions, at least mine was, and probably yours too, was shock. It was shock about, whoa, did not expect that to happen. Because Brian Kelly said after the Citrus Bowl, he felt 100% confident that all three quarterbacks were going to come back. But, when you break it down, when you really think about it, it makes sense, right? Like, did they really expect to carry three quarterbacks into the spring? A quarterback, your starting quarterback, and then a quarterback who's going to be very obviously your backup, and then a 5-star, really promising prospect in Walker Howard to be the third string scout team quarterback for the second year in a row? Like, probably not, right? But then when Brian Kelly said, we feel fully confident that all three are coming back, then I was like, okay, I'll take your word for it. So while the shock dissipated and kind of going to what's next for LSU's quarterback room, and I'll get into that, even further in the next segment. But whenever people were thinking about, the quarterback room coming up next in 2023, I thought a lot of people were going to say, okay, well, does LSU need to add more depth? Do they need another backup? But as far as the rest of the quarterbacks were concerned, I noticed that there were a lot of LSU fans, and not all, and maybe it's not you and you're rolling your eyes at this, but a lot of the response was, way to go, Jayden Daniels. A lot of the response was, this is all Jayden Daniels' fault. A lot of the response was, how dare Brian Kelly push out Walker Howard for Jayden Daniels? And I've talked about this for so long, yet it still continues to come up in everyday conversation. It still continues to be a take shared by a lot of LSU fans. And I don't understand why. For the life of me, I can't understand why. I can't understand why you think that Jayden Daniels is personally vindictive toward Walker Howard and it pushed him out. This is football, okay? Players go wherever they get their best opportunities. And if they're buried on the depth chart and they don't want to be buried on the depth chart anymore, then they leave. Walker Howard's not the only quarterback that has done that this year, has done it ever, or will ever do it. It happens. Walker Howard wants to play this year. He wants to he gets an opportunity this year. He didn't get that at LSU. That's not Jayden Daniels' fault. It's not Jayden Daniels' fault that he won the starting job. And the vitriol toward Jayden Daniels, I don't get it. After all of these years as LSU fans, we know how long it's been and how frustrating it's been and how infrequently LSU can get elite quarterbacks. And maybe, no, I'm not even going to say elite. Better than competent quarterbacks. Quarterbacks that have talent to match the rest of the roster. Because so many times I would just get so frustrated at the amount of talent that LSU would have, either at the running back position, or the wide receiver core, or defensively, or maybe all of the above, and the quarterback just wasn't up to par. And you get a quarterback like Jayden Daniels, who accounts for almost 70% of the offense, who throws for almost 3,000 yards, throws for 17 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions. And you can't wait to get him out of there. And you are personally attacking Jayden Daniels for thinking that he isn't worthy of the starting quarterback position. And you might say, well, LSU could have been a national title contender if it weren't for Jayden Daniels. Did you think LSU was going to get past Georgia in the SEC championship? I didn't. I don't think Jayden Daniels was the problem against Tennessee. You could say that maybe, Jayden Daniels against Florida State, completes a few more passes. Sure, that's fine. That's a fair argument. I don't think Jayden Daniels was the difference in a win or loss at Texas A&M. It was just a bad game overall for that team. So, no, I don't think that LSU was a better quarterback away from being where they were versus being a national title contender. LSU got to the SEC championship game in Brian Kelly's first year. That's so impressive. And you don't want to give Jayden Daniels any credit for it. And yes, Jayden Daniels could have done more. He could have thrown the ball more. He could have been a little bit more active or aggressive in the passing game. Sure, those are all totally fair critiques. But looking at the success that LSU had in year one and not wanting to give Jayden Daniels at least a little bit of credit, I don't think that that's necessarily very fair. And you can say whatever you want about Jayden Daniels. You could say, well, him coming back is the reason why Walker Howard transferred. Well, Walker wouldn't have been the starting quarterback this year anyway. I mentioned Brian Kelly saying after the Citrus Bowl how, he was 100% certain that all three quarterbacks were coming back. And that's the headline right there. But listen to what Brian Kelly says in this clip and really dig deep into it. And I think that's another reason why Walker Howard decided to leave.
I absolutely 100% believe that all three quarterbacks are going to be with us. And all of them we've had conversations with and feel that that's the direction we're going.
Okay, that's my bad. I played the wrong clip. But the clip that Brian Kelly mentioned, in the clip, Brian Kelly mentions, we're going to give all of our quarterbacks an opportunity to compete, and Walker. So Walker Howard wasn't in that conversation. It was, we're going to give both of our quarterbacks the opportunity to compete, both of our quarterbacks and Walker. So, even then, Walker Howard wasn't in competition to even be the backup. So the vitriol toward Jayden Daniels is, I think, disrespectful. He's the starting quarterback of this football team for a reason. If Walker Howard was the best quarterback in that room, he'd be in the conversation to start next year. He wouldn't be in Brian Kelly's words, kind of tertiary or a second thought. Brian Kelly and the rest of this team have given other true freshman opportunities. Look at Will Campbell. Look at Harold Perkins. Look at Mason Taylor. Those were all cornerstones of this team this year as true freshmen. It's not like it's a war on young players. If young players give your team the best opportunity to win, that player will play. I don't care if you're a freshman. I don't care if you're a senior. Doesn't matter. That's what this coaching staff has shown us. So if Walker Howard was the best quarterback in that room, he'd get an opportunity. But in Brian Kelly's words, it's both of the quarterbacks and Walker. So it's not on Jayden Daniels. Enough with it's all Jayden Daniels' fault. And coming up next, Walker Howard decided to enter the transfer portal. Does that tell us more about this quarterback room beyond just Walker Howard himself as far as 2023 is concerned? I want to get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about betonline.net. BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. So get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. You've got pro football. We're getting into the playoffs, the wild card weekend this weekend. You've got basketball, college basketball. We're in conference play, also NBA. They've got it all on betonline.net. So if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. Get smarter, listen to some of the experts. It's super fast and it's super easy. Get all of your betting information and wager at betonline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything that you need to know about college basketball, all in one place, wrapped in a nice little ribbon. Plus, hear from big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So I know that Walker Howard deciding to leave LSU puts a really bad taste in a lot of LSU fans' mouths. First and foremost, he's an LSU legacy. His dad played quarterback at LSU. He's a local kid. He's from Lafayette. He played high school ball at St. Thomas More. If you're listening, you probably know that high school. And it was a really big get in the 2022 class. The fact that LSU was able to keep an elite talent, a top quarterback in this year's draft, and be able to keep him in Louisiana. A lot of the national pundits expected Walker Howard to go elsewhere, maybe to Alabama or somewhere else in the SEC, but he stayed in state. And that was a really big statement. And that was a really big win, I think, for all of us as LSU fans. This team might be turning a corner. This whole philosophy of keeping in-state talent in-state, it's coming to fruition. And I know, beyond just his local ties, I know that losing a 5-star prospect hurts. Absolutely. The potential of Walker Howard and not being able to realize that potential, it hurts. I think we were all excited to see what Walker Howard could have become wearing the purple and gold in the next coming years. I was excited about it. But I'm not going to discredit Walker Howard. He wants an opportunity to start. You're not a 5-star quarterback and one of the top recruits, most highly touted recruits in the country, and just be okay with sitting on the bench and being a scout team quarterback and holding a clipboard for 2 years. His dad said, they fully expected that. I think that most true freshman quarterbacks, not all, there's totally exceptions. Bryce Young was one of them. A lot of young first-year true freshman quarterbacks go down the same path that Walker Howard went down, where year one, you kind of ride the bench, you learn the system learns you. And then usually in your second year, you get an opportunity to start, but sometimes you're the backup. So freshman year, you chill, you learn, you develop. Sophomore year, you're probably the backup. By the time your junior year rolls around, you're probably the starter. That's, I'm sure, what path Walker Howard expected. I'm sure that he viewed his LSU tenure to be something along those lines, where in year 2, he would at least get the opportunity to see the field. Fine if he's not a starter, but as a backup, at least, you have the promise of, maybe you'll see the field, maybe you'll get those opportunities late in games where LSU is pulled away. Maybe the starting quarterback, knock on wood, gets injured and they get their opportunity. Like what Garrett Nussmeier got this past year, where we saw a good bit of Garrett Nussmeier. Didn't get a start, but saw a good bit of Garrett Nussmeier, especially on one of the largest stages in college football when he went in the SEC championship game. So, well, as surprised as I was, when you think about it, it's really not much of a surprise. But I think it could mean something beyond just himself in terms of this quarterback room. This might be the proof or the security that I at least needed. The security that Garrett Nussmeier is coming back next year. And I said this on the podcast yesterday. I said if Garrett Nussmeier and Walker Howard both decide to transfer, you are screwed. Because Jayden Daniels is your starter. I guess Ricky Collins is going to be your backup. Well, that can't work. A true freshman. So you're going to have to go into the transfer portal and find another quarterback to be a serviceable backup and find a quarterback that's cool with being a backup. Find another quarterback out there that's willing to come into a quarterback competition. But then what's the plan for the future? Does that backup become your quarterback of the future until Ricky Collins is ready? So I thought, LSU would be royally effed if both of those quarterbacks decided to transfer. But going back to what I just said, in year 2, a quarterback at least wants the opportunity to see the field. At least wants the promise of being able to go in and be the guy. As a backup quarterback, you have that opportunity. You do have that promise, at least, or that hope. So if Garrett Nussmeier was going to transfer, I can't imagine that Walker Howard would as well, because Walker Howard would most likely fill in as the backup as a sophomore for the 2023 season. Then he'd be the starter in 2024. Well, I think that would be the best possibility or the best case scenario for Walker Howard if Garrett Nussmeier did decide to transfer. Why wouldn't you stay at LSU? He would get great opportunities this year and be promised probably an even bigger opportunity the following year. But if Garrett Nussmeier said, nah, I'm going to stick it out, I'm going to stay, I'm going to be the backup this year so I can win the starting job next year. Maybe that was what Walker Howard, all he needed to hear to say, okay, but then I'm going to leave because I want the opportunities that you're getting and then some. Maybe it had nothing to do with Garrett Nussmeier. Maybe those two didn't even talk about it. Maybe Walker Howard's decision is solely based on what he needs for himself and no other, outside influences. And it had nothing to do with Garrett Nussmeier or the rest of the quarterback room. But I do think it's pretty likely that they had a conversation, that all Walker Howard wants is an opportunity. And that if he had an opportunity at LSU, I have to think he probably would have stayed, right? He's a Louisiana kid. He's an LSU legacy. It's not that he's just like not bought in to LSU. It's not that he thinks that you can't be successful at LSU. I tend to think that, and this is just my opinion, this is based on zero fact or zero context clues that I've been given, that Garrett Nussmeier probably said, hey, I'm coming back. I'm going to commit to LSU. I'm staying at LSU. And Walker Howard said, all right, if you're staying, I'm going. I need more than this. That's just my opinion. But I think that maybe that's an opinion based off of just trying to ease my own anxieties or fears of Walker Howard potentially leaving. But maybe that's, really truly what it was. And if so, I think that this LSU quarterback room is in fine shape. You can always add more depth. You can never have enough depth, especially at that position, the quarterback position. And knock on all the wood that Jayden Daniels doesn't get hurt, and then Garrett Nussmeier gets hurt, and then you're going down the ranks at the quarterback position. That fingers crossed, you're not going to need the third guy in line at some point in the season. Knock, knock, knock. Crazier things have happened. So if LSU does decide to go, add more depth, I think that would be a really difficult sell for a player in the transfer portal, but still not impossible. But I think at this point, the room is fine. You feel comfortable about it because this year, Jayden Daniels is your starter. Garrett Nussmeier is your backup. Ricky Collins comes in this class. So Ricky Collins kind of fills in that role that Walker Howard was in this past year. Ricky Collins is scout team. Ricky Collins holds the clipboard. Ricky Collins is simply just developing this year. So next year in 2024, Garrett Nussmeier is likely your starter. Ricky Collins could be your backup. And then in 2024, Colin Hurley comes in, 4-star from Jacksonville, coming in 2024. And then the cycle continues. As long as the room stays as is, the transfer portal is open for one more week. As long as the room stays as is, and Brian Kelly and the rest of this recruiting staff continues to get a quarterback, a solid, top of the class quarterback. Doesn't necessarily have to be top of the class, like a 4 or 5-star quarterback in each class. I think that this quarterback room is going to be fine. But at least for the time being, at least for the near future, even without Walker Howard, you can feel fine about it. You can sleep at night. More depth is never a problem, is never an issue. But I don't think this quarterback room, as constructed, as it is now, is an issue either. Coming up next, there was another addition into the transfer portal. What does that mean for that position group? Is there more depth needed in that position group? We'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about Built Bar. So I know it's the new year, and I know that you probably spent all the holidays drinking a lot, eating a lot. You want to get back into shape. Maybe your New Year's resolution is to eat a lot healthier. But it's also kind of hard to do that because eating healthy isn't always fun. But with Built Bar, it is. It's healthy and it's tasty. They are so delicious. You're going to feel like whenever you bite into one that it's not good for you because it tastes so good. because they're covered in 100% real chocolate and they taste like a candy bar. And they have flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, all of these flavors that taste like candy bars, but they're actually really good for you. They're only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. I mean, it's a great treat. It's delicious. It'll taste like a dessert, but you don't have to compromise your diet or eating healthy to have one of those and to indulge into a Built Bar. And now you don't even have to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about how you can order your Built Bars at built.com, and you can still do that. But now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. So if you go to Walmart, walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, one of my personal favorites, double chocolate or coconut puffs. Or if you're closer to a Sam's Club, you can run in there, grab a 13-bar box with the hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. That is Built Bar, built.com. Okay, so Walker Howard obviously is the biggest story. Quarterback, 5-star recruit. Dad played at LSU, LSU legacy, local kid, him entering the transfer portal, and especially that position. I mean, it's freaking quarterback. That's the biggest story. But also coming down the pipe today, sophomore edge rusher Zavier Carter has also entered the transfer portal. So when BJ Ojolari and even also Ali Gay, when they each announced that they were entering the NFL draft, Zavier Carter was a name that I mentioned to potentially fill in either of those roles. Zavier Carter is really a true pass rusher, so that's why I thought that he could be in competition to eventually fill that Jack Backer role, that kind of edge rusher linebacker role that BJ Ojolari had been playing the past couple of years. I thought that he could fill in there. Also, Ali Gay kind of as a defensive end, and that he could compete for those positions as well. So he's versatile enough to be able to play like an edge rusher, a defensive end role. And he was one that I didn't look to say, oh, yep, he's definitely going to get the role, but a guy on the depth chart that at least had a couple years of experience. He's been at LSU for 2 years, had a couple years of experience, and could be in competition to potentially fill those roles. And he's played 11 games this season. 17 last, so he's played in 18 games throughout his career at LSU. 0 starts within the last 2 years, but in 2022 in those 11 games. And he was out for a few games in the middle of the season, missed Florida, missed the game against Tennessee in the month of October. Recorded 5 tackles, one of those for loss, and 1 sack. So, not crazy numbers, not crazy stats, and, not game exploding numbers from Zavier Carter, but he's at least seen the field and at least has shown some promise. But I think when he was recruited into LSU, the expectation was that maybe he'd do a little bit more. Because coming out of high school, he went to high school in Atlanta. He was one of the top edge rushers in the state of Georgia. And I look at states like Louisiana's one of them, Georgia, California, Texas, Florida, some of the most recruiting fertile states in the country. When you are one of the top players in the state, in those states, that's when I know, okay, this kid's legit. He's not just, number one player coming out of the state of Idaho. This is Georgia now. They got good players in Georgia. But I think that it's less about Zavier Carter's ability and more so kind of along the same lines as the Walker Howard narrative is it's not that he's not good enough to compete. It's just that there are other players with either more experience or are more refined that can contribute to this team right now, that can better service this team right now. You're looking at Bradyn Swinson, an edge rusher transferring in from Oregon. You look at Dashawn Womack coming in the 2023 class. Some websites have him listed as a 4-star. Some have him listed as a 5-star. But all in all, Dashawn Womack, a really solid recruit coming in the 2023 class. Also look at Arizona defensive end Paris Shand that's entering into, let me grab my notes, that is coming into LSU from the transfer portal. I mean, Paris Shand has 3 seasons at Arizona under his belt, 23 total games in his career. Bradyn Swinson, he was at Oregon for 2 years. He was at Oregon for 3 years, has 2 years remaining of eligibility. He has a start under his belt, 30 games under his belt, 35 tackles, 8 tackles this past year. So guys that are coming in with a little bit more experience and guys that have been handpicked by this coaching staff. And I think that Zavier Carter just saw it and was like, look, there's a lot of guys competing for these spots. I haven't really been getting the looks that I want to, at least in year 2. And I don't see the clearest path to doing that in year 3. So I'm going to enter the transfer portal. So Zavier Carter, of course, that's a loss. I think that this defensive line group and the linebacker group can use all the depth that it can get. I went on Tiger Rag Radio earlier this week, and I mentioned how that LSU has been picking up more corners in the transfer portal, which is great. The 2 defensive linemen that I just listed, plus Jalen Lee, nose tackle out of Florida, a couple of defensive linemen that have been bolstering up this LSU roster in 2023, but expect to see some more linebackers come down the pipe. Of course, with Mario Tolan entering the transfer portal, the linebacker group is a little bit thin. And I know that is not Zavier Carter's official, title. It's not his starting position, but it's all kind of, edge rushers, linebackers, defensive linemen. They all kind of exist within the same sort of hemisphere. So that's what I'm kind of looking to see LSU add maybe a little bit more depth at the edge rusher position, maybe a little bit more depth at the linebacker position. But as players continue to enter the transfer portal, LSU also continues to collect those players in through the transfer portal the other way. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, a very special anniversary. What does LSU have to do to get back to that point? We'll get into that plus so much more on tomorrow's episode. But thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything that you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.